Welcome to the Trail Network podcast. We're so happy you're here. On this week's episode, I chat with Alex Staten and Stefanie Flippin. Alex is a trail and ultra runner from Fayetteville, Arkansas, a Diné and Mexican woman, and this year's GU Energy Labs and Rising Hearts athlete in the Western States Endurance Run. If you followed along with Golden Hour at Western States, you followed Alex's journey from Olympic Valley to Placer High, where she missed the cutoff on the track by 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Her day was one of rising above countless challenges and willing her body to the finish line for reasons far beyond individual motive. Stef Flippin is a professional trail and ultra runner for GU Energy Labs and Lululemon. She's a physician, coach, and podcast host, and she has the privilege of coaching several of the Rising Hearts athletes, including Alex. They formed a lasting bond over the last year and as a result of Alex's journey to Western States, and we get to hear about it on this week's episode. I hope you enjoy. All right. Hello and welcome to the Trail Network podcast. I'm Leah Yingling, and I'm joined by two people who I deeply respect and look up to for a variety of reasons, but most specifically due to their resilience in the sport of trail and ultra running and their ability to use their voices for advocacy. So Alex Staten and Stef Flippin, thank you both for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Leah.
Yeah. So Alex, you're most recently coming off of an incredible Western States finish. I believe you were the second runner who missed the cutoff running 30 hours, 2 minutes and 49 seconds.
50 seconds, but
50
seconds.
Give or
take. Give or take.
And then Stef, you are Alex's coach and one of my good friends and somebody who I've looked up to for quite some time as an athlete and coach in the sport. So yeah, welcome.
Yeah,
thanks.
So Alex, if you wanted to share with our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey in trail running, and maybe a little bit about your journey to Western States this year?
Yeah, sure. Well, I started running back in 7th grade as a way to get in shape for soccer. And then slowly it became my only sport. And I did my first trail race in 2011. I had to look that up before because I couldn't remember. And it was when trail running was fairly new around here in, at least I think for most folks. And so I couldn't even find results on the internet. That's how old it was. Because I ran through high school, and after that and getting into college, I just wanted to do something to stay active, and found that trail running was a lot more fun than road most of the time, and, got me into different areas and, exploring different places. And then in 2019, I did my first ultra as a 55K, the Canyon de Chelly Ultra in Chinle, Arizona on the Navajo reservation, and I don't think I could have picked a better first ultra. And I mean, it was a lottery entry, so I was pretty lucky. I got that was my second time entering the lottery, so I didn't have to wait too long. But that just really kicked it off for me. And then I think, it's kind of the gateway, right? Like you do one and you're like, well, could I do something a little further, a little longer, a little more challenging? And then that curiosity grows. And then also for me, doing that race, I learned a lot more about the Navajo, the Diné culture that I'm from, and the connection to running through that. And so it really started to shape my why beyond, I just love getting outside. I want to stay active. I want to be healthy. And it brought even more meaning and purpose to running. And so, like I said, that was the gateway. And then from there, did a few more 50Ks. Some really went really well. Some I just signed up for and kind of forgot about, and then still showed up and did it. And then a few years ago, I did a 50 miler. And then from there, I think that was my next, like the 100-mile distance. Like I thought about 100K, but the 100-mile distance, I was like, I just want to see. I need to scratch this itch kind of thing. And so I did Arkansas Traveler, which is a qualifier for Western States, and put my ticket in December. But prior to that, I got contacted by Jordan from Rising Hearts, and they have a sponsorship with GU, or a co-sponsorship, I should say, and they offered me their spot. And I remember I was sitting at work, I think it was like a Wednesday, and just freaking out. And I mean, no one in my office like knows, they say, oh, 5K ultras, like not exactly. So I called a few people, my husband, my mom, I think, and just like, guess what? And so then it started. And then I got an opportunity to work with Stef, and I've already heard of Stef because she coaches a good friend of mine here and came highly recommended, and I followed her on social media and, knew what she stood for. And also I know that, this is someone a lot of experience with the race, with coaching, but also really takes into account the human side of it and the mental side of it. And I knew that would be something I would definitely need, not just for this race, but just in general, and someone that gets it.
I love that so much. And I think that's something we all have in common is our relationship with GU Energy, who I think is doing really important work in the sport right now. And Alex, I think something that you had mentioned on the Building Kinship panel at Western States was not just creating an atmosphere for people to feel welcome in the sport, but keeping that welcoming atmosphere in the sport. And I think that's a really important point, and something that I'm seeing GU do over the last few years is not just going through the motions, but standing by, advocating, and really ensuring that that community is instilled and maintained, which I think is extremely important. And Stef, I'd love to hear more about your relationship with the GU sponsored athletes, with Rising Hearts going into Western States this year. I know you're somebody that left your profession a few years ago to dive full into coaching, which I think speaks a lot about you and must mean that coaching really is part of you. And like Alex mentioned, you really take the whole human into account, which I think for anybody looking for a coach, that's what you want. So can you talk a little bit about how you stepped into that role and what it's meant for you since then?
Yeah, I mean, Leah, you brought up this is a conversation you and I have had, off air, just as friends, one-on-one too. But yeah, last spring, I decided to definitively take a step back from my profession in healthcare and medicine. I was feeling really burnt out after the pandemic, and I also just, like Alex had mentioned, I love connecting with humans. I love that aspect of medicine. I hate the bureaucratic side of it, to be honest. And I really, like, something in me just said, like, hey, why don't you give this a shot at going all in, like with coaching and your own training? So I took a leap of faith there, and it couldn't have been like a better decision for me. GU Energy, I think you and I, Leah, signed with GU as athletes like around the same time. But this past year, just as my relationship with the brand has grown, and they've just gotten to know me a little bit better as a coach, and then like as an advocate for representation and a higher level of diversity in the sport. GU and Rising Hearts, and yes, Alex had mentioned Jordan Whetstone. I also coach. I have the honor of coaching Jordan as well. But yeah, Jordan and GU Energy via Magda Boulay, our good friend, reached out to me in terms of forming a partnership of coaching the GU and Rising Hearts sponsored athletes like into Western States, and that was such an incredible honor to me. I didn't take it lightly. I understand the type of trust that goes into reaching out to someone, especially for athletes who, again, like Alex had mentioned, she lined up on this start line not just for a belt buckle, right? Like it was not just like, let's tick this, 100 miler that's extremely difficult to get into off this list. Alex runs for a much greater purpose and why than most athletes, I would say. And that's not to downgrade anyone's why by any means. But just getting to know Alex over the past few months, I have a very deep understanding of what running and just exploring her limits on trails means to her. So yeah, like I mentioned, just a really incredible honor to have GU and Rising Hearts instill their trust in me to help guide the athletes. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all that's ahead with that partnership as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I don't think they could have picked a better person and coach for that role, Stef. I think just the trust that all your athletes have in you speaks to that valuable relationship. And I think that's extremely important. Not just are you building training, but you're advocating for your athletes as well and making them feel safe in their training, feel trusted, feel heard. And I don't think there's anything more important than that, truly, in the sport.
Oh, that means a lot. Thank you.
Alex, Arkansas Traveler seems like a great stepping stone to Western States. Western States being your second 100 miler. I believe you're native to Arkansas as well.
Born in California, but moved to the area when I was about 3. Actually, well, Southwest Missouri to be real specific. But the Southwest Missouri, Northwest Arkansas is kind of one little big area, I guess.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what was different about your experience at Western States this year compared to your first 100 miler that you lined up for?
Everything was different. Oh gosh, the 2 races are kind of hard to compare. Just in terms of, I mean, looking at just on paper, right? The course elevation, one, States is a point to point. Traveler is kind of a loop out and back type of situation. Not a lot of single track on that one. And it's run in October, which for our area, you could either be getting nice fall crisp temperatures or it's going to be summer still and a lot of humidity. But States, of course, it's a dry heat and, I don't take a dry heat lightly. Probably should have paid more attention to that this year, but we can get into that a little more later. But man, there's so many both of them. The volunteers are unparalleled and, the people that come out to support. I think Traveler feels definitely more like a smaller community just because it's a little bit of a smaller race. But I chose that one because it's close to home. I say close. It's like a couple hours, but, not a plane ride. So a little less logistics to work out there. And, it's just, I knew I would be seeing people I recognize from the running community here. So it was a nice one to kind of dip my feet in. But I mean, Western States, even though it's bigger, it still felt like, almost like your small run group community. And I had the opportunity to go to the training camp in May. So, I met some people, met Craig Thornley, the race director, finally got to meet Diana Fitzpatrick in person and some other people that I've been connecting with. So it made it that I think that experience helped make it feel a little more, familiar and more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think something you didn't mention is you got to do the land acknowledgement at the Western States training camp. Talk a little bit about that and what that meant to you.
It was an honor to do it. A little nerve-wracking just because public speaking. I don't know if that's anyone's favorite activity. But it was nice to set the tone, not just for everyone running, but even for myself. It just as a reminder to myself of, why we're running, whose land we're running on, and the whole concept of you're not running on the lands, you're running with the land because it's a living thing. And, it was great that, that was something that was started, a few years ago, I think when, Yadika Star Fields and Callie Vinson, they were the previous GU and Rising Hearts runners. And it was an honor. I mean, it's, and special. The words I was speaking were not my own. They were, provided by the Nisanon, and I wanted to do my very best to, be the vessel of that message to everyone participating.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important part of training camp is setting that tone. I think every time I hear a land acknowledgement, it moves me to tears. It's beautiful. It's moving. It reminds you of how we got where we are today and what the past entailed. And I think having you represent the land acknowledgement at camp was truly beautiful. And I think you did an amazing job setting the tone for what the rest of camp entailed. Because, like you mentioned, we're not running on the land. We are truly running with the land. And I love that shift of perspective. Stef, going into training Alex for Western States, I believe that your relationship started right around when Alex probably found out that she got a slot into Western States. Talk a little bit about how you build a coach-athlete relationship, how you build the training, and especially for Western States. It's not an easy race. What does that look like, and what do those steps for you as a coach look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think during Alex and my our initial conversation, I do this with every athlete that I work with. I think it's really important to have a good understanding of the athlete's bandwidth, just in general, as well as what type of terrain, what type of trails they have available to them. Alex works full time. She has a very busy life. She had a lot of oftentimes stressful work travel. I know Leah, you can definitely empathize with that as well. So yeah, I think during our first call, we sort of nailed down that in order to chunk up the necessary training, and in terms of the elevation gain that we needed to get, that maybe Alex hadn't done for her previous training block, just because, like she'd mentioned, the course profile is quite different for the two of them. Yeah, we decided to break training up into 4-week sort of blocks or chunks to make things a little bit more digestible and not just this constant build. I think the three of us can nod in agreement here that it can look daunting sometimes when you're 16 weeks out from a race and you're just okay, how long are these long, how burly is this going to get without any type of reprieve along the way. So it was important to me that the training that I was writing and designing for Alex felt very manageable in terms of all of her personal life stressors, everything that she had on her plate. And I never wanted her to feel like she was having to sacrifice, familial relationships, her marriage, friendships, that type of thing. Even though, this is Western States and we were definitely going to be taking the training seriously. But yeah, I think just in terms of the more nitty gritty of what the training looked like, we eased into things with the elevation gain. I mostly wanted Alex to be able to get back out onto the trails, not having to worry about, hitting specific elevation gain, hitting specific mileage, just keeping things fun as she eased back into a rigorous 100-mile training block. And we focused on speed for a bit and just getting the legs turning over. I know Alex in her training log would often comment that she really enjoyed the shorter type of speed work. So I really wanted to maintain the elements that were fun, because I knew at a certain point, I'm okay, the further along we get into training, I am going to have to start giving her, longer, these longer hill repeats, very specific elevation gain. So like I said, it was important to me that I sort of cued off of her from her feedback and her training log of what she was really enjoying. Yeah. And then also just really important to work with her in terms of her work schedule and not have her feel that she was absolutely having to get in a 12-mile trail run or something like that after a long day of work. But yeah, and constant communication. I think Alex and I touched base, I would say at least 4 times a week.
Wow, that's awesome.
I try my best, but yeah, close to hopefully around daily, just because I knew that the training for this was going to start to ramp up and be pretty intense. But yeah, Alex and I would hop on calls once a month to check in. And Alex also didn't mention that en route to her finish at Western State, she also raced Miwok 100K. Yeah. And the conditions were not quite, we knew we're okay, she's getting out to California, she'll have some of that more buffed out trails and more of those extended climbs. But yeah, since, for listeners, since Miwok is in the Bay Area, we didn't quite get those similar conditions to Western States. In fact, Alex was racing in a pretty torrential downpour for the bulk of the race. I'll let her go into that. But I can't say enough incredible things about the way Alex approached this training block. It was so much fun to work with her.
Oh, I love to hear that. Miwok this year, I think, had pretty wild conditions for what they historically do have. So probably not the heat training you probably wanted and needed going into Western States, Alex. Yeah, Alex, talk a little bit about what your block looked like with Me Walk and then training camp. What were barriers that you experienced? What were the high points? What were the low points? And did you enter Western States feeling ready to tackle the 100-mile distance?
Yeah, for the record, I gotta say, I think that was the only year Miwok has had that kind of forecast. But it was so fun. I've run some of my best races in that kind of weather, and it was fun. But so to kind of, I mean, when we first kicked off our training together, I mean, the communication from the get go was just perfect and remained perfect. And I'm sure Steph could, tell on some of the weeks when I was getting a little more in my head and I'm like, am I ready? Am I ready? Because I compare, it's hard, or I say it's easy to start comparing to past times and past, blocks. And I just kept reminding myself, like, your running evolves, you evolve as a person and, different where you are, in your personal life and things. So I just tried to make sure to keep my head about me. But the training block, like Steph said, I love the short, I like speed sessions. I didn't do them on a track ever, but as much as I love trail running, I do enjoy a good track workout every once in a while. But so compared to my last 100 training block, Steph only had me running 5 days, which I really feel like my body appreciated those 2 rest days and, taking that seriously. I've dealt with some chronic stuff like Achilles that, get unhappy, and I got to that starting line healthy. And I think that is a big part of any ultra distance, but especially when you get into the longer stuff, you just want to be healthy. And I didn't come down with any colds or anything like that. So for me, that's a big win. No major setbacks in training. I think sometimes, and Steph could, I know, attest to this, but, that Me Walk race, it was in the perfect spot. Because for me, I kind of need something to break up that training, like a race or something on the calendar. And for me, it was a fitness check and also just a little boost in confidence. I mean, that I can't remember how much elevation gain was at Miwok, but maybe 12,000 or so. I mean, it's pretty significant. And also just traveling for a race and kind of, getting that organization down of what do I need to take and, working with maybe some more limited stuff than if I was racing somewhere locally. So going into Miwok, I was excited. I mean, leading up to the race day, our travel day did not really go as planned. We had a lot of delays and got in late. I think the only thing open for us, like restaurant-wise, to eat was In-N-Out. And you know what? I think that's my pre-race meal because it worked for me. But Miwok was a great, like I said, fitness check, but also just the course. And I mean, definitely not the same heat that States has, but the climbing was, I would say, fairly similar, especially right out of the gate. I mean, you start Miwok and you immediately go up some stairs and you just keep climbing for the first, I want to say 3 to 4 miles. So it was just nice to do that, and especially race somewhere a little different. And it's so beautiful. That race is probably forever now on my list of places to go. And it also happens to be a qualifier for States. So I have a ticket, which I am most definitely going to enter. So that was a good just break in the schedule to do that. And then, we took a little down week and ramped back up. And around that time out in Arkansas, it's starting to get warm and it's starting to get humid. So like heat training, it's perfect for that. The humidity is a little bit of a different factor, but I would argue that humidity can be pretty tough and it can get you ready in some other ways. And so this is for sure probably the most climbing I've done as far as in training and focusing specifically on, okay, you need to try to get this much gain in a run. And so going into the States week, I mean, I felt good. I was ready to go. And I think even, afterwards and kind of the recovery last few weeks, I mean, I'm moving around better than I did after my first 100, which I feel like says a lot. And I mean, I have a lot of gratitude for that, but then there's kind of that frustration aspect of it too. Like, well, and we'll get into more of how the day played out later. But I mean, I felt so ready, and Stef helped so much with my confidence going into, and just, like, you got this. And also just other things that I took away from my first 100 of nutrition and, working with my crew. And, we already talked a little bit about Goo Energy, but I'm just so grateful that I happen to love their product, and they're great people as well. Because I dealt with a lot of GI stuff my first 100, and that was one of my goals going in, and something we worked on these long runs. And with Miwok, it was a great dress rehearsal to try not only gear, but like the fueling and knowing what combinations of things worked, and then even taking that into the training camp weekend. And that was another, I should say, good like break in the schedule too. Like, I think, I don't know, if you can get your long runs done in a race or something like that, where you just have people around you and, you can get a little competitive, it's just nice. It kind of breaks up monotony, especially if you're hitting a wall, which I do every now and then in training.
Yeah, no, you bring up some really good points. First off, I had In-N-Out also. Like, I think I had it 2 days before Western States, so it's a good pre-race meal. Also, humidity. My husband and I just had this conversation today. We're up in Silverton for Hard Rock weekend right now, and we're probably sitting at 10,000 feet. And I'm like, I swear humidity is worse than altitude. I think it's harder than
100%.
altitude. And I think anybody that trains in the Midwest and East Coast, bless your souls, because it is tougher than just about anything else. The dry heat is easy. But yeah, Alex, you mentioned community, you mentioned racing in a block leading to Western States, and like training camp. You're running with a bunch of people. It allows for that time to pass quickly. You're involved with the Trail Sisters organization in Arkansas. Talk about how that involvement, what that looks like for you, how that helps your training. I personally really stand by having a community around you to take some of those barriers away from limiting some of those runs, the encouragement that you get from community. Talk about what your Trail Sisters involvement looks like, and how that's helped your training and what that's looked like.
Yeah, the Trail Sisters organization, I mean, for me, my involvement started back when I lived in Springfield, Missouri. When I got out of grad school, I lived there for a while and worked. And I mean, it started out as a blog, and I think that I found it through social media. And then they were finally starting the local chapters. Joined one, and then became a co-leader of that chapter for a while until I moved to Fayetteville, and thankfully met my friend Hannah, who was also crewing, pacing me at States, and she wanted to start one. So we became co-leaders. And just from the get-go, that was great, because it's a little, daunting to start a group like that. And I wanted the help and appreciated her. And so we started that a couple years ago. And there's already a lot of groups in the area, a lot of running groups. But this was the very first Trail Sisters one. And it's one of those, it's aside from the running aspect, we really try to emphasize the no drop aspect of it. And, we also host hikes, because I think that's probably one of the first questions I get, in my messages after we post an event. Someone will message, say, well, I'm this pace, like, is this okay? And, we try to just emphasize, like, yes, of course, like, the point of this is, we don't come with an agenda. We don't come with our workouts that we want to do. It's about getting together and helping women, explore the trails and also get comfortable. And, we've seen a lot of different connections within our group of, people that get together outside of our, like formal events, and they explore more trails. And then, people start running more on trails, but also like do their first trail races. And so you kind of get to see like that domino effect of, their confidence grows, and, they start meeting other women that enjoy running. And yeah, it's been really rewarding, and also just getting the chance to, be involved not only as a co-leader, but, on kind of the bigger scale of it. I really like what Gina Lucrezi has done with the organization and like how it's evolved. And so there's over 100 or so groups, or a few hundred now. I mean, and also in other countries. And I feel like that speaks a lot to, how much these, groups for women, but also just having that emphasis on you're not going to get left behind. Like, don't worry about pace, don't worry about any of that. And, it's been a rewarding experience, and it's something I'll stay involved with for probably ever.
I love that. I think having a community to help you and be a part of your journey is also important. I think Steph and I had the privilege of being on the Trail Sisters panel at Western States last year.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of my highlights of my journey to the Western States and that start line last year was just seeing women show up for women as well, and seeing women represented in a variety of forms. And I thought that was just beautiful. And I'm very grateful that Western States has a partnership with Trail Sisters for that reason, because I think, people want to see people like them in the sport and connect in that way. And then, like you mentioned, like try to limit as many barriers as possible, like pace, making sure that everybody feels welcome and they don't just come to the first run and get dropped and then they never want to come back because they don't think it's an inclusive space. So yeah, I love that you're involved with Trail Sisters. I think what they're doing is awesome. Shifting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steph.
No, I was just going to pop in and say that, Alex also worked in like quite a few Trail Sisters meetups, like within her training block. And I would always smile because Alex would, drop me a note and she would say something like we're going to go on this like Trail Sisters meetup. It's probably going to be like more like a hike. Is that okay? Like, and I'd always be like, yes, like, I don't want you to skip that. Please work. Like, we can absolutely work that into training. And I think that's another just amazing like touch point too, especially for athletes who maybe are like new to working with a coach, or just not even just new to working with a coach, but if you're so married to a training plan, you don't have to be. Like, there are tons of different ways to work in that community time. It doesn't matter if it is more of a hike or like slightly slower than like the pace that you would typically go. I think all of that time on feet matters, but most importantly, like Leah, like you've already mentioned, that community time I think is invaluable, and it can just sub in for, especially Alex, like you said, when that training just really starts to add up and you're like, I don't want to take this long run on by myself. So I just wanted to underscore that because Alex was really great about reaching out to me throughout the training.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of training too, Steph. Like, thanks for emphasizing that. Is like, I mean, I think there's been so many days in my training where I'm like, I don't want to do this run today, or this run is like not going to benefit my mental health, but actually, having a time on feet day where I'm hiking with friends, that's what I need. And I think sometimes, especially in this day and age where I feel like everybody's getting a coach in ultra running, which is, I mean, it's amazing. I love structure. I love having the accountability, but sometimes you feel like you need to do exactly what the training says. And I think sometimes that can take the joy out of it. So being flexible and stuff, it sounds like you allow for your athletes to have that flexibility, and it's really nice. I think balance is really important.
Yeah, for sure.
This episode is brought to you by Osprey. I see Osprey everywhere, as I'm sure you do too. Whether it's luggage, kids carriers, or running packs, Osprey is the one-stop shop for adventure. My current favorite for backpacking is the Aura LT50 for lighter weight, multi-day overnight trips where comfort and ventilation are critical. It has an anti-gravity suspension that delivers a weight-defying fit that seamlessly envelopes your back and hips. Talk about comfort. The pack also has easy-to-use side pockets, trekking pole attachment, and integrated rain cover. And it's made with recycled materials. Head over to osprey.com and click on their tool, Pack Finder, to find the perfect pack for you.
So Alex, I want to hear a little bit more about race day. All I saw truly was a glimpse into your story at the finish line. And I mean, Golden Hour is the most joyful, but also at the same time, the most heartbreaking time in ultra running. And there was 2 finishers. yourself and the one guy that finished just ahead of you that I think had the entire track in tears. Let's hear about start to finish. I think what got highlighted was your finish. It was beautiful. It was moving. It was heartbreaking. Missed the cutoff by about 3 minutes and claps right before the finish line. And with the help of your crew and like just your energy, you got yourself across that finish line. But what did the day look like leading up to what everybody got to witness on the track?
Oh, goodness. Well, how much time do we have? So from the get-go, I mean, Stef and I, we talked earlier in the week about like, just strategy and overall, what maybe times, time ranges. And for me, that's more like information for my crew, just to give them kind of an approximate arrival time. But, what I really appreciated about, the whole training process and this run was, Stef didn't want me to get hung up on specific times, paces, but really going, for effort. And not only hearing from her, but readings about other things. I kind of nerded out on all things Western States and leading up to it and just trying to gain bits of knowledge. But, the escarpment, I mean, it's easy to get excited and, and that can be good and bad. I haven't done too much of an analysis on my time, but I think I looked at my watch and I kind of went, oops, okay, this was maybe a little quick. Yeah. Because, and, the altitude, I was fine in it. I was so happy with that. But the climb up the escarpment, I mean, it's everything people say it is. You look back behind you a few times and you see the sunrise. I forgot to look behind me at the very top. It's just it's loud and there's just so much going on. And, I just got up over that hill and I'm like, I got on the other side. I'm like, I didn't look behind me. I was supposed to look behind me, but I had before I got there. So I didn't feel like I missed out too much. But once I got over that little hill, I say hill, over the escarpment, the mountain, it's that running. It was nice and smooth. I wasn't really sure, like, being in the high country, what that would feel like. But I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. And so, I mean, the running was pretty easy. It wasn't I think my main focus at that time was, okay, we're here, let's make sure, don't forget to eat. Like, it's exciting. This is exciting, but keep up with the nutrition. And getting into that first aid station, I think that was like the longest stretch. What is it, like 10 or so miles? Like, it feels kind of a long time. And I think in my head, I don't know why I had like 7 miles in my head, but like, wait, you have a few more to go to get there. And so, earlier on, I didn't need much. I was pretty efficient in and out and trying to just not look at my watch too much and just try to go off of feel. And, let's see, I saw my crew the first time at Duncan Canyon. Yep. And, that I think for me, I mean, seeing my crew is everything. And, my husband there and my good friends, it's just, sometimes it's all that boost that I need. And so kind of refilled and got some things, checked out. I don't know if I started feeling blisters or not by then. That might have been a little bit later. But, so got through there. And then I think Robinson Flat was the next big spot that I was going to see some people. And we did kind of a 2-crew system, because we were told that, getting to Robinson Flat can be really tricky, or it just can take a lot of time. And, I've heard of people missing crews there. And so, and also just if looking at the crew map, it's a little trickier to go out from Olympic Valley, go all the way to Robinson Flat. And you can't really hit any spots before that if you're just doing one crew. So splitting them up was probably one of the better ideas logistically. And after the race, we were like, yeah, that's probably the way to go if people can manage it. So getting Robinson Flat, I think before then, I was already starting some topical cooling. I had just heard from a lot of folks that, it's important to do and to start early. And up at that point, I don't think I felt like I was, too hot or anything. I mean, still then it wasn't too late in the day. So, I mean, it was pretty mild. And, this year at States, it wasn't the hottest by far on record. It was pretty mild from, comparing it to past years. But I was just thrilled that there wasn't as much snow. We probably get maybe a few good snow days here, and then that's it. So that was one thing that, going into the race, I was keeping an eye on pretty closely. I'm like, please just let there not be crazy amount of snow, because that could be.
It was bad last year. This year was lovely.
That's what I heard too. And so that spooked me a little, but not having that element was helpful. And then Robinson Flat, that was probably like one of the first bigger aid stations. I mean, that one was kind of crazy. Just, it's a lot of people, a lot of energy. I got cooled off pretty quickly. And so getting out of there, and that was the first point of the course where I'm like, oh, wait, I recognize everything from this point on because of training camp. So that was a really big, boost to me. Just, okay, knowing mentally I have this edge, I know what to expect. Getting out of that aid station, I started getting, and I don't know, I think I dealt with this a little bit through training camp too. My psoas was just cranky. So I had to do just some and the only thing it would respond to was just self-inflicted trigger point, therapy on it, and just trying to keep moving. And that was a section I got a little frustrated because I could not move as fast as I wanted. And which is irritating because that's basically where it starts, that half marathon downhill, and wanted to make it more time, but kept moving. And then I saw my next Dusty Corners was the next spot, or maybe do I have that? No, that was it. Dusty Corners was next. And so I started feeling some blisters creep up, and I told myself going into the race, okay, take care of any small things early and don't let them build up. And they didn't have anyone to work on those there. So I needed to make it to last chance. And I saw my crew at Dusty Corners, got cooled off, got some more nutrition. And then at last chance, especially before getting into the canyons, I was like, well, I should probably, take a look at these. And hindsight's always 20/20. The day before the race, they had their foot person out there taping people, and I was a little distracted. And I remember passing, we were leaving the runners meeting, and I had a thought to myself, maybe I should stop, maybe I shouldn't. But I was kind of feeling like I needed to catch up on recovery and just rest, and so I didn't think about it. And also making kind of some rookie mistakes of just, putting a lot of putting lube on your feet when you don't need to, if it's going to be wet, and that just keeps them wet. So at last chance, they took a look at my feet and they're like, okay, yeah, we need to get these taken care of. Drained off a few good blisters. Really, I can't say enough about all the volunteers and especially the medical. But so got those taped up and got out. And 2 minutes and 50 seconds, that over 100 miles, that could be added up anywhere. It's there's so many different spots where okay, maybe I could have done this quicker, gotten out of here faster. But got through the canyons, and I really relied on just thinking about, okay, well, climb hard, climb with intention, and just go. There's really nothing else you can do. And I remembered them well from training camp. So I knew what was ahead, and kind of knew that, this was going to suck for a little bit, and it is what it is.
Exactly. Man, it sounds like you did expert troubleshooting out there, though. From the topical cooling to the eating early and often to the taking care of problems before they become big problems. That sounds like an expert mindset for 100 milers. So being that this is your second one, it's probably really easy to think about where you could have saved 2 minutes and 50 seconds across the course of the day. But it sounds like you had all the tools in your tool belt for problem solving, and like you were really staying on top of that stuff and climbing well and thinking about the race as a whole throughout the day. So props to you for doing that, because I think there are probably easily 100 people in the Western States field who cast those things aside and just think about the race at hand. And yeah, brilliant. So props to you for that, even though I know some of those small problems probably ended up becoming bigger problems.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Leah. I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a, I don't know, too gracious of a statement, because I feel it. Well, eating wise, like I think if people can stomach real food earlier, I think, that is something I would have changed. But, I think a mistake I made was stopping the topical cooling too early, because later on that caught up with me. And I think it's just one of the things you think, oh, sun's going down, it's getting cooler. Well, when I went through the canyons, it was later in the day, but I mean, that's one of the hottest spots of the day. And as you know, like the fires over the last couple of years, the burn scar is that it's exposed. And I think also not being a little bit behind on my time at that point, it put me in a spot where I was running in some of those exposed areas when I didn't think I would be. And then after getting to Michigan Bluff, got my feet looked at again, changed some socks. And then, I mean, it was really or not Michigan Bluff, sorry. What was it before that? Oh, Devil's Thumb. Of course, Devil's Thumb.
Oh, they were great. They had popsicles.
Oh, I got one of those. I can't remember what flavor I got. I was just like, just give me whatever. It's fine. Yeah. But getting to Michigan Bluff was the next spot where I would see my crew. And so that was, for me, what was the most motivating, and, getting that little boost of energy from them. So got there, got my headlamp, and realized that the headlamp I had gotten, I think I would turned it on and the batteries were it was like near dead. And thankfully I carried some extra on me. So swapped those out real fast, got going. And as you know, like Forest Hill is like, I mean, that's the next big aid station. And people say the race starts at Forest Hill or the river, depending on, your school of thought there. But getting to Forest Hill for me was a big deal because my grandma and my grandpa were there, and it was the first time I was going to see them all day. And got there, got my feet looked at real fast again. Well, real fast, but probably not. It was a little bit of a longer stay there. Got my shoes swapped out, got some food, and got my first pacer, my cousin, Madison. That was her first time pacing me, and it was great in getting onto the Cal Street sections. And that's kind of, now looking back, that's kind of where I think I missed some signs of things starting to kind of go south a little bit. Started throwing up. And at the time, like just before that, I was kind of leapfrogging a runner and he was throwing up. And then I got kind of sick and I'm like, maybe this is like empathy throwing up. Like I'm just, cause I've never I don't think I've ever vomited in a race. So I was kind of like, okay, maybe I just need more ginger. Things were starting to not sound great. So, and I forgot to get caffeine at Forest Hill, which, rookie mistake. And I kind of know by now, for me at 100K and 100 miler, I need to start getting a little more caffeine and get a Coke or something. And so I got to that. That was probably my low. I mean, aside from maybe a little later on, but just getting real tired, and you're kind of, I think I tried bargaining with Madison, my pacer, can I sit for, can I have 15 seconds? I just want to nap on that rock. And so getting to Cal 1, my first, priority, give me a Coke. I need something, and just get some calories, and, the fizz from the soda just helped to calm my stomach. And it didn't even cross my mind that I was getting hot or getting overheated. And, the topical cooling again, that should have been something I kept doing. And it was a little cooler. I mean, it was nighttime, but still it was warm. So we kept moving. got through a 6-minute hill, which was probably more like 10-minute hill at that point for me, and got to the river. And by that time, I think my watch died.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. No, not a knock on Koros at all. I love my Koros watch, but I was using the navigation on it, which again, I'm kind of a rookie mistake. You don't try anything new on race day. Tried the navigation on there, but I wasn't really worried. I was with Pacers the rest of the way, so they're gonna have a watch. They're gonna know what I need, and really, you just need to know time of day and what the cutoffs are. So it wasn't a big deal. And crossed the river. That was a great experience. A little nerve-wracking that time of night, or morning actually. But I think that alone probably gave me a little bit more just energy. I mean, I cooled off, and that probably, I don't know, maybe bought me some more time.
Yeah. It's refreshing. And I do feel like you're a multiple person that I've heard to say that it just does this reset for you, because like you mentioned, it's really easy to think like, oh, it's dark, it's not that hot anymore. But that Cal Street section, as regardless of time of day, feels like an oven. And it's easy to leave your topical cooling at Forest Hill thinking, okay, going into the night, that section, not too bad. So I can definitely empathize with that, because I had similar feelings. My watch also died last year at Western States from navigation on my Koros. So relatable.
Okay.
Well, I also wonder too, just we had touched on this earlier. It's just something like my coaching brain is like, it can be so tough too, coming from when you're used to like a humid heat, and then when it's more of a dry, and I do think that Cal Street section can start to feel a little bit humid. You're just like getting closer to the water. But that being said, like comparatively though to the conditions that you train in, Alex, like in Arkansas, I think that can be a little bit confusing too, where you're like, oh, well, I'm not like drenched in sweat because the dew point isn't crazy high. So it can maybe feel a little bit cooler, even though your probably your core temperature is still getting quite high and getting overheated.
Yeah, Alex, I'd be curious too. It sounds like your crew was this family affair, which sounds amazing. And my dream. I had a race a few years back where I had all my sisters, my parents at, and to this day, I'm like, that race in 2019 was one of the highlights of my running career. So that was probably so special coming into Forest Hill, seeing your grandparents, having your cousin pace you throughout the race. How did you prep them for what to expect? And what did you need to hear from your pacer at times? Like, did you tell your cousin any specific things to keep you moving?
Well, doing the training camp helped a ton in just what I like. So going through those sections myself, and then being able to relay back that information to my 3 different pacers that I had was, I think, a big help. It's one thing when you look at the website and you're looking at the, elevation profile. And through that section specifically, like, it's a nice downhill, but it's not the most technical, but it can be technical if it's, 3 a.m., 2 a.m., and you're tired. And so I told her that, we need to make up some time. We need to try to move. And that was her biggest task, was just keeping moving and trying to remind me to eat. I don't know if she was probably unsure, like, how much she could push me, if she could be a little mean or, give some tough love a little bit. But I mean, she did an amazing job. It was perfect. And, I think especially like for her, like, she runs and she's very active, and she lives in California and has access to very similar trails. So, I think she had a lot of confidence going in. And the night running is fun. I enjoy that aspect, and I know she does too. So, for her, that section was just about, get me down to the river, that's kind of the main thing. And also just really being efficient at aid stations still. So yeah, that's kind of the course information are specifically about whatever section that pacer is doing. And, for us as a group, like, that just, the instructions kind of change depending on how things are going and how that day is unfolding. And, part of it's fun kind of after the race to debrief with everyone and, I love hearing the stories from their perspective on, how the day went and, what internal conversations they were having. And my husband and Hannah are kind of co-crew chief, captains. They were already kind of like doing the math. And like when I got to the river and switched pacers and picked up Hannah, she knew we had to make up some time and she had to keep me going. And, she's my trail sister co-leader. So throughout that section, I kind of mentally, I just went to a place like, you're just meeting up with Hannah before a Trail Sisters event. Like, just think about that and just keep going. Cause I kind of like, my stomach was meh, it was okay. But I could tell like my head, I was getting a little, I wasn't loopy, but just a little like dizzy and just things, things weren't firing on all cylinders. But, just even that little mental shift of, okay, you're at Western States, but this is just a Trail Sisters run. Like, just keep moving and go.
That's a great mindset, because at that point you'd probably been running for close to 24 hours and you're tired, you're exhausted, and it's those mental strategies to make it feel like it's just another day. And I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At what point did you start to have to think about cutoffs at aid stations?
Oh gosh. I mean, leaving Forest Hill, I kind of already knew I was behind where I wanted to be and what we were expecting. And then going through the Cal Street sections and actually I think probably the biggest, moment was Rucky Chucky, because, we got there and they're like, you have less than 10 minutes to get across that river and get on the other side and go. And so we got there. I swapped my shoes out because I had a dry pair on the other side, the far side, and climbed up to Green Gate. And then once we got to Green Gate, they were starting to make some announcements like, okay, you're just on 30-hour pace, like you got to go. And so we really tried to take it up and keep moving in that section. And in my head though, I mean, the sun was starting to come up and I was like, all right, I already knew it was ahead, and I tried to make sure I didn't get too caught up about, or in my head about like the next few sections, just because, I knew how exposed they were going to be, especially once you get out of Pointed Rocks, you get to No Hands, and I knew it was waiting for me, and I was still trying to eat. I found it was that liquid energy that Goo has, and I hadn't had it before, and I was just like, you know what the heck, like, I need something, I need calories, let's just, because at that point, like, drinking, like, it was just, I couldn't trust a hiccup. I know that sounds weird,
never
I couldn't trust a hiccup. But otherwise, like, my legs were good. Like, everything else felt fine. So Hannah, she did her job. And that's kind of like, she's more my tough love. Like, I'm going to be a little more firm with you and get you moving. And so she got me there. We got to Pointed Rocks, and, my husband, Emery, was my last pacer. And that's kind of been, this is only second time pacing me, but I told him after this, I'm like, I think that's kind of tradition. Like, I think, you're the one I want to bring me home, and get me to that finish. And he also, he runs, he's more of a soccer player. So when he was asking about pacer sections, he's like, well, how long is that one? Like, it's only like a 10K. You'll be fine. He's like, okay. And he's kind of banking on me moving a little slower at that point. So he's okay. He prefers that last section. But once we got to Pointed Rocks, it was, like, you have a few minutes, like, you got to get in, get out. So we didn't, linger there at all very long. And, he knew, like, just a bit, he swapped watches and had Hannah's. And so we knew what pace we were on. And, he told me, he's like, you need to run. I think it was like 14s or something. You need to run 14s to get there. And he would keep me moving. And by that time, I'm not sure if things were really registering of like, if I was even thinking that heat, core temperature was really an issue. I knew I was warm, but I didn't feel it. And maybe that's a sign. And, later on he would tell me, he's like, I was thinking something was a little off because you were a little less sassy with me. Because in the previous 100, he paced me the last section. And when he would try to get me to go and move a little more faster, I would usually have a little comeback, or I would just get a little mouthy. And he's like, you weren't doing any of that this time. He's like, so I was kind of like wondering. And so once we got across no hands. And then, as you know, you start that climb up. And by that time of day, it was full sun. And I also knew, like, if you see Tim Tweetmeyer, if he's kind of on your heels, like, you're really getting down to it. So we got up to like there's that last little like bridge kind of thing, and then you kind of go up those stairs.
I hate that part. That's like my least favorite part of Western states.
Yeah, and it's just rude. I mean, to have that little section there. But then we got closer to Roby, and Emery was just trying to get. He's like, you gotta go. Let's try to move. And I guess it was maybe a volunteer. I can't remember his name, but he was like, okay, we're gonna bring some aid down to you. Like some of the aid station people from Roby came down with some sponges, and they're like, nice. Once you get up to the top, you can take her pack and help just take off some of that weight and everything. And I could start hearing people, and I heard my family, and I was like, okay, like, and at that time, I don't think I was really running in my body. I was just going. I don't know how to explain it.
Out of body experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And once I hit the pavement, though, like, the heat felt like a wall, and it was hot.
Well, and I think every single time I've finished Western States and then I'm out there during golden hour, my comment is, this is a different sport for the golden hour finishers, because like I had to encounter one day of heat, and that heat from 8 a.m. till noon is absolutely brutal, especially on the section that those last 6 miles, you're exposed the whole time. And even leading up to Pointed Rocks, you're exposed the whole time. So it's so hot. And the next day it was even hotter than the first day. So it absolutely is like it's a whole different ball game. And I want people to understand that, like, who are listening to it's entirely different, because you have to battle so much at that point. You're battling the heat, you're battling the cutoff, you're battling probably like inner demons of just wanting to be done. What did that last punch on the road up above Roby is just a heartbreaker. What did that last like mile and a half or so feel like for you after seeing your family?
I mean, like, as we were doing that climb up to Roby, where you can start to see it, and Emery, he was really trying to like coax me along, and I think it was, he's like, at that time, like, you were just kind of like, I think he used the word whimpering. I don't know. He was just like, you wanted to kind of stop. And I think, and like looking back these last few weeks and thinking about it, like, I think at that point, like, I wasn't getting to that finish for me anymore. It was like, I just got to get there. And, I want to get there for my family, the people that have, supported me. And, I want them to be able to see this. And, like, my grandparents are in their 80s. I'm like, okay, like, who knows when I'll get back into this race? Like, we got to just go. And, I don't think between Roby Point and getting to the track, there weren't like many things I was like there were some things that were registering to me, but I think at that time cognitively, like, things, heat stuff, it was starting to set in, and I don't know, like, I mean, I could kind of like clock few details. I knew Casey Lichtig was running alongside me, like little weird things were registering to me that I wasn't like, I was just kind of random, I guess. And I had very little like feeling of like how fast I was going, because afterwards Emery told me, he's like, you were running, like that split was like less than a 12-minute mile. Like it was like an 11 something. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like I felt like I was like running through like sand. Like it just, my legs felt heavy. I'm like, okay, I mean, I'll take your word for it because I don't really know.
I believe you.
Like my watch is dead, so I have no data on that, but sure. So, and also like, I mean, I had my watch on, I had the time of day, and I also knew my watch was like a minute behind. And I'm like, I know I'm not gonna get there in under 30. Like I knew that. But I was like, you know what? We're here. Like like, I'll be damned if I get pulled like, you know, half a mile. Like, let's just like go.
Get it done.
And got on the track and again, like clocked some other weird random details. Like my cousin ran in with me. She had by that time was done pacing, and, you know, saw her and a few other people that, you know, family members. And I mean, and that's where the wobbles started. And I mean, I don't know if, you know, you've ever had this feeling, or listeners, where like your legs start to kind of give out, and it's, you know, everything that like a little baby deer looks like, like a, you know, baby horse. And it's just like, there's no other way to describe it. But the one, like I went down, and I think everyone's instinct was, oh, we got to help her. But something I held on to in my head was like, no. If you help me across that line, I am officially disqualified. And so, you know, people, and I've since watched the commentary, and like, you know, the commentators were like, oh, she's pushing people off her. And so I don't think people understood why. Like, I mean, I wanted to do it on my own, but
100%.
just also for the fact that, like, if you help me across that line, which is 5 steps away, you know, it's not just a DNF, it's a DQ. Yeah. And I'm like, don't touch me. I gotta get across. And I kind of remember that. And then kind of remember getting across. And then, you know, after that, details get a little fuzzier for a little while. But it was just, I mean, I do remember like the crowds and just the noise. And it was incredible. I mean, that kind of like atmosphere and energy, it was just amazing. And it's something that I think everyone should experience. And I don't know, I think Craig Thornley, I think he said, you know, if everyone could experience a golden hour or the golden hour finish and watch it, you know, at Western States or anywhere, like, you know, world could be a better place. Like if you just witness that kind of, you know, that kind of human grit and just all the people that come out for it. And it's amazing.
Ugh, you just gave me chills saying that, because I firmly believe that. I think it's one of the most special hours in the sport, especially those last 5-10 minutes of it, when you're seeing people like you pull everything they can out of themselves to make it to that finish line. And especially even when you saw that cutoff time kind of slipping away, doing it and finishing it and doing it for the people around you, and not just for yourself, but willing yourself to the finish line. It was so inspiring to see. Steph had actually messaged me as you were getting like on after Roby Point, and she's like, please make sure you're out there. I have an athlete that's going to be really close to the cutoff. And I loved getting that. That was the best message. I was out there cheering, and just like watching you do that was, I think there wasn't a dry eye in the stadium. And it was just, I think that's going to be something I tap into in all of my future races, was just seeing your resilience and your resolve too. Like, you still had your wits about you to be like, guys, get off of me. I need to do this alone, which is pretty cool. Steph, what was going through your mind when you were following the tracking, watching Roby Point splits and watching Alex get there?
I know. I had planned to be there in person. Unfortunately, I hadn't been able to travel out like last minute, but I had been in touch with Jordan, who was also leading like the film aspect of Alex's journey. And I knew, and for listeners, like, Alex was ready for a 27-hour day, like anywhere from 27 to 28 hours. She had demonstrated the fitness for it. And I knew it was gutting for her to be in this position. We had prepared, but like Alex had mentioned early on, I didn't want her to be obsessive though about the cutoffs. Like I really wanted her to ease into that first 50K. Leah, you are someone you've spoken with me personally and many others about the way that, the real, like the best way to pace this race. And I didn't want Alex to try to like rush through that first 50K, especially, with her being at high altitude, which she performed fantastically in. But I could, following along with the tracker throughout the day, I was like, I knew we were getting really, really close there. And oh man, my husband and I had our computer up, and the moment Alex came into the frame, and like the camera footage really became like more clear, like it wasn't just like grainy anymore. Uh, I burst into tears because the first thing that I noticed was just how pale Alex's lips were, and I knew that we were in a bit of a dire situation here. I didn't know how dire, I think we all, we know like how significant rhabdo can be and like getting overheated, but then we also know that like, okay, like there's this huge range too. And sometimes it's not quite as life or death. But just seeing how pale Alex looked, I burst into tears. I like immediately was like, oh my gosh, like, is it this bad? Like, I didn't know, like her state of health. And I just, in my mind, I was like, I really hope that, and it's interesting that Alex brought up that she was no longer finishing for herself, because that was honestly like what I deeply felt in that moment when I saw her. I was like, she is no longer finishing this for her. She's doing this for everyone else, her family, probably like Goo, Rising Hearts. And my initial like knee-jerk reaction was like, I just hope she's safe. Like, and I hope she's not feeling like she has to do this, because of all these eyes that are on her. But I think a moment where I was like, Alex and I are very connected is because when I saw her get onto the track, in my mind, before she came, like fell to her knees, before she pushed her crew off, I was like, she has to do this herself. That was, I knew that. I was like, and this is probably going to be a little bit rough. And Alex, when you did fall, and then your partner and your family, when I verbalized, I said to my husband, I said, push them off, and then she did, and that's what I knew. I was like, we are just on this like across like time and space right now. We are on the same wavelength, and then you were able to get yourself across the finish line. And I tell every single one of my athletes that I work with, like the time on the clock, like whatever, if you finish, if you don't finish, if whatever decisions you make, it never changes how proud of you I ever am. And I hope that resonated with you, Alex, just because during our pre-race call, I had said, I was proud of you 4 months ago. I was proud of you last week. I was proud of you yesterday. I'm proud of you today. And no matter how the day pans out, I will be just as proud. So yeah, extremely emotional. I hated that I was having to watch remotely. And I just was like, oh my God, like I was sending so many texts, calls. But ultimately I was just so, so grateful that you were healthy. And yeah, that you were able to get to that line and you had plenty of medical and all of the top-notch people there to take care of you after the fact.
Yeah. And Alex, I think something that was beautiful to see is something that I think across the kinship panel that you were on at Western States was representing more than just like your finish at Western States is like you stand for so much more. You represent so much in the sport and you represent so many people that have otherwise like not seen themselves represented in the sport. And I think that is an absolutely beautiful thing and it's powerful. And I'm so glad that Goo and Rising Hearts have stood beside you in representing your story from start to finish, from going into the race, the training. I think you just represent so much. And it was so powerful to see at Western States. And I'm so grateful that you were able to represent that, to just show everybody following Golden Hour, like who Alex Staten is, what she's doing, what she's accomplishing. And yeah, I can't tell you how much I'm going to tap into that experience in the future.
Gosh, same.
Thank you so much. It was a little overwhelming, and it's kind of bizarre, like coming, like in a few days after, and getting on social media and just like, wow, okay, like getting just messages from random folks. And I mean, it's definitely helped me just process things a little more. But I mean, to be able to be a part of, the Rising Hearts and the GOO initiatives, it definitely adds a lot more to my running. And I'm now a Running with Purpose advocate athlete with Rising Hearts, and just, other ways to kind of learn to use my voice and where and how, and, working with other people that, are already doing great things and learning more from them, and, bringing even more diversity and inclusion into the sport. And I'm just glad to be a small part of it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about Running with Purpose and what your role has looked like so far as an advocate and athlete with them? So
it's a fairly new role. I started probably midway through the training. Jordan offered me a spot with the team, and what's helpful about it is, if you're a person that I wouldn't say I'm shy. I'm probably a little more introverted, but it gives you an opportunity to learn about what other people are doing, the other advocate athletes, and there's really free reign to do as much as you want with it, and also different things that causes people that you want to uplift and highlight. And so for me, I'm still kind of finding kind of my way with that. Now that Western States is done, that's something that I'll be turning more attention to. But really for me, I mean, I just want other, little girls to see like, oh, I'm also, indigenous and, Mexican, like, oh, I could do this too. And, just really opening the door. And, also for me, I wasn't raised on the reservation or brought up with real in some of the traditional ways, and part of that, the message I want people to hear is it doesn't really matter at what point in life you're in. It's never too late to learn and reconnect with your roots and your family. And so for me, it started when I was probably in my early 20s. So, I don't want people to feel isolated in that, and that, there's no wrong, way to go about it. And, there are no silly questions. So that's something I would like to, do a lot more with the Running with Purpose advocate athletes.
I love that so much. Like really seeing somebody for who they are, and just no limitations on that. That's beautiful. I hate to ask this because I know we're only 2 weeks post Western States, but what's next for you?
Oh no, I love that you asked that. Well, I mean, I want another shot at that race. I think I was messaging people after the race, and just after getting recovered from everything, and Miwok was one of those races I thankfully had, as part of the GOO Rising Hearts opportunity. And so it was, it was helpful to get out there. And, now in hindsight, I'm like, I'm really fortunate and have a lot of gratitude for doing that race, but it's keeping my tickets alive. So, I think I had texted Magda, I think maybe the next day, and she was checking in on me, and I was like, well, I have a Miwok entry, or I have that ticket. And she's like, so it's not too early to talk plans? I'm like, no. But that would, it's just, well, and it's, it's a lot of different reasons. I mean, I'm competitive. And, when you're that close and knowing that your fitness is there, it's just like, it's little things. I don't know I know a lot of people spend years trying to get into it, and I didn't want to, that was something I didn't take lightly either. I knew what kind of opportunity this was. And, I know that people, they make it, that's their running career, if you will, like, accumulating tickets and trying to get in, because it's special to them. But I guess, for right now, just getting, back into running a little bit more, it's starting to get hot here. I say it's starting to get, our summer can last a while, but it kind of like this, the next few weeks into August, it's going to get really hot. So I do take heat very seriously. And, I've been out of the heat for a good 2 weeks. So basically taking time to get acclimated again. But the only other race I would have on my calendar, there's a local race around here that I've done every year since it started. It's the Back 40 trail race. I've done different distances each year, but they have a 5-miler, and my friend Hannah and I were like, let's just get in really awesome shape and just, rip it on that.
Rip it.
So we're going to definitely do that. But I don't know. I mean, as we talked about earlier, I get excited with speed workouts, and, if that lottery, goes my way in December, I mean, I think building just a good, healthy base, I felt good, soft tissue wise through most of the race, but I mean, there's always little things to improve, mobility and stuff like that. And, I think getting fast would be nice.
Yeah,
Faster.
I think Steph and I talk a lot about this, is just like diversifying the training to keep it fun, but also to like work the different systems. And I think just like the seasonality of running is nice for that. And having a time where you train for 100, having a time where you work on getting faster, I think it keeps it fun and keeps it engaging from like a longevity perspective too.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
I think longevity, and especially with recovery, I mean, I'm in it for the long haul. And so, when I was working on getting discharged and, getting back home, I was telling the providers, like, you don't have to worry about me. Like, I'm going to take these instructions seriously. I'm not, not going to be dumb about it. Because I know I don't want to generalize this, but sometimes runners can be a little stubborn, and they just like, no, I'm going to go right back to it. It's like, well, if you want to be doing this for the next, 50 years, then you should probably chill out a little.
Yeah, you've definitely done this recovery right, Alex. But I do want to pop in and say that you did text me from the hospital and you said, we're just getting started. So, which I agree with, but you have taken your recovery very seriously, which is wonderful.
Well, and I was going to say too, Alex, that perspective, like I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, just like that expert mindset from what you talked about with the early stage of the race to even like post race with recovery. I think that's those things combined are what leads to a long career in the sport. And yeah, you're so young. And like Steph mentioned, you guys are just getting started.
Yeah.
So I really hope the lottery works your way come December. I would love to see you line up at Western States again. And get that like 27-hour finish like Steph was just talking about, because I'm sure the 2 minutes and 50 seconds left you guessing, left you thinking a little bit about what could I improve on, where could I find those minutes. But I mean, just a complete like honor getting to watch you grit it out on the track and get it done, not just for yourself, but for everything you represent, for all your family and all those around you. Like, you're a complete inspiration. And I hope you know that.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And Steph, gosh, I can't say enough about working with you. It's been great. And I mean, I know, and I really love that you shared that little anecdote about, how we were connected in the end of, get off me, and, that I needed to do it on my own. I think that's, that's really saying something. But yeah, it's just been wonderful working with you.
Likewise.
You guys are both wonderful. Before we head off, anything that you'd want to leave our Trail Network podcast listeners with, where to find you, anything you want to plug?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I think I need to give another, shout out to just the volunteers at Western States, especially the medical team. I mean, I had a unique experience, but I've worked in healthcare before as an athletic trainer, so some of this was a full circle moment for me. But I mean, rapid response and stuff like that is very important. But I mean, just another also shout out to GU and Rising Hearts and the work that Rising Hearts is doing and that Jordan's doing. It's going beyond that land acknowledgement. And I think that's a big part of it too. And thinking about not only whose lands we're running on, but, running with the lands. And it brings so much more to, a trail run or a hike, and having a deeper appreciation for it. And then of course, for me, getting into trail running was really supported by trail sisters and meeting other women and, kind of demystifying that space a little bit and, getting a little more brave and learning about races and, really how to kind of push your limits a little bit.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex.
Yeah.
Anything from you, Stef, before we kick off?
Oh no, this episode is completely about Alex, and I'm just so proud of her. And I completely agree with her, uplifting those 3 organizations of GU Energy Labs, Rising Hearts, as well as Trail Sisters, just really doing like what Jordan refers to as the heart work. And yeah, just really grateful that the 3 of us are mutually connected via GU, because they're just setting such an incredible example, especially at Western States. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. Both a complete inspiration to me. And I think you guys are everything that is good about the sport, and hope it stays that way. Thanks for joining.
Thank
Leah.
You.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Trail Network. Huge thank you especially to both Stef and Alex for sharing their story and relationship with us. I encourage you all to explore the work and collaboration of Rising Hearts and GU Energy Labs as they increase representation of Indigenous runners in the trail space and raise awareness about the history of the land we have the privilege of running on. Until next time, we'll see ya.